The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6, The Price has just dropped. As we push our way to the season finale, was this a successful trip down memory lane? Do the flaws of Season 2 continue to show its ugly face? Let's dive into the review. Welcome, guys, to our Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6 review. I'm your host, Frank, joined with Haki, and this is the penultimate, right? They call it the one right before the season, the season finale, Episode 6, The Prize. And we're going to start off like we always do with our non-spoiler review. And this is, again, from a perspective of gamers. I have experience with The Last of Us. Haki does not, though. He understands, like, the Last of Us kind of story. We've kind of, if you've been following us, this is, again, the 6th time we've done this. So we're going to go non-spoiler. Let's start with the good of this episode. And then we'll dive into, we'll go good, bad, final verdicts, and then do a spoiler discussion at the end. And with the good, I want to just start off with saying this. This was a big flashback episode. We saw a bunch of flashbacks here. We saw a return of a fan favorite. Again, don't want to give too much spoilers until we get to the spoiler section, but you have a fan favorite character coming back in this episode, in Joel. And seeing him and Ellie in their dynamic again was refreshing. And I think that's when kind of you're seeing Joel is fantastic. He's a really good character, done very well in both seasons. And you saw that again here. Just a real strong performance with him and even Ellie. And I know I ragged on Ellie quite a bit this season, including last week where I thought 75% of the time that she wasn't that good. I thought she was good here, and I'll give her kudos. I thought she was strong here. That connection between her and Joel, the dynamic between them, is really good. And I do like how you saw progression of her kind of changing as the episode goes along, which is what I really wanted to see more of. Like, they kind of force it with the time jumps that they do here. But that's what I kind of wanted to see from Ellie, and I thought she did a good job in this scenario. Another thing, you're going to get a ton of references, right? There's a bunch of game references that you're going to see in this episode, which I do, obviously, as someone experienced, can appreciate and want to give kudos to them for that. Haki, what were some of the good that you liked in this episode?
Yeah, so like you said, man, definitely a flashback episode. Although, it was a filler episode, I think they did pretty well with filling in the blanks, especially for someone who never played the video games. You got to see kind of the relationship dynamic that they went through, kind of a strong relationship begin to fall apart a little bit.
Yep.
We're going to go into it, obviously, in the spoiler section here, but, Ellie catches Joel in a lie that kind of surfaces a past lie of the Fireflies. So a big step in their relationship and kind of the fall apart of it. And like you said, man, Ellie, I think, did very well here. She kind of bounced back, especially at the end. She did very well. A very, very good scene. I think one of the better scenes that we've seen throughout the entire season happened in this filler episode. Yeah,
and I think this was actually her best one. I'll say that right now. I think this was in my opinion, her best episode. Also, they do, before we get to the bad, I do want to mention that they did another one of these hotkeys that me and you talked about last week, where they foreshadow something in the beginning and then deliver it towards the end of the episode. To me, I like when they do that stuff, those kind of references that they do. And we'll get into that in the spoiler discussion. But with the good, we do have to talk about the bad. And again, when you get these it was a lot of human-to-human dialect here. So, again, don't want to give too many spoilers, but I thought the moment that you experienced the infected in this episode was a bit missed. I thought there could have been more to it, and I think it would have really put cherry on the top for me on what I think was a strong performing episode from the different actors. If I got a stronger infected scene, now we're really getting a complete experience for me for Last of Us episode. So I thought they missed on the infected part. You do get infected reference, but didn't deliver to the part where I hoped it was going to. And we'll get into the spoiler discussion because I don't want to reveal what happens there, but I thought they missed on that opportunity to make it a bigger moment. And again, I've been saying this, I feel like a parrot at this point. It's been an issue all season long, which is pacing, right? Everything is very fast. This is like a full-on sprint. And some of us were hoping for a marathon. We're getting a full-out sprint. We're getting an Olympic sprint here, similar to what we saw in season 1. So that kind of issue is still there. So I can come out each week and say it, and I will say it to point it out. Now, the pacing is not as damaging as I think we've seen in other episodes. compared to this one, but it still rears its ugly head on we can't dwell on a lot of stuff. We got to keep moving. Even though I do think it was a little bit, they handled the fast pace better in this episode than we have seen in previous ones, but I still count it as a lingering problem. Haki, your thoughts on the bad?
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Again, I've said throughout this whole entire season and really even season one, whenever the infected is, even a not a big part, but even at least a good part of the episode is kind of my favorite when it comes out. So I think they missed it on the infected. Hopefully this isn't too big of a spoiler, but no Seraphites, no Isaac. We only saw them a few times in the last couple episodes, and I still don't really know who the Seraphites are. And I really like Isaac as a character, and I didn't get to see him in this episode. So I think they missed the mark on a couple things. Again, it was a filler episode, so I'm kind of torn here. I think they did a good job filling in some of those aspects, and letting us know kind of what happened between Joel and Ellie. But, they missed on a few things that kind of brought it down for me.
All right, now let's jump into our final verdict. And when I look at, again, Rotten Tomatoes, you see the critic scores, they kind of grade the season from the get-go because they get to see it ahead of time. And I think all the reviewers got to see 6 episodes. So no one saw the season finale, which is going to be really interesting when we get into it next week. So you see the Rotten Tomatoes are pretty high. I think they're in the 90s from the critic scores. Then we had the user scores, which was way down, but they've been way down since episode 2. Because we all know what happened at that point. So I like looking at IMDb. I think it's a more fair. They go episode to episode. And this one rated pretty high, 8.8 out of 10. The second highest in episode 2 with around 10K votes. And to me, I've always been lower than the audience through the entire season. But I'm actually closer to this one with the audience than I have, I think, any of the episodes. I'm at an 8.5. And I really liked, again, the game references here. I thought they delivered on it. There was some slight changes, which I'll talk about into the spoiler discussion, but they do hit on the big key moments. Joel continues to be fantastic when he's in. This is obviously the last big piece we're going to see of him, obviously, in this season. But I even thought Ellie, which has taken a ton of criticism, and some, I just don't think that's been played super well to this point. I thought you saw the younger version of Ellie and then growing into the older version, and I thought she played it pretty well. And so I'll give credit where credit is due. I thought she did a better performance here, probably her best outside of the end of episode of last week. I thought she really delivered in this one. So with that, I think it was really strong to me. The action is obviously not as great as episode 2, but we talked about the issues I had there. We know pacing continues to be an issue, but pacing didn't affect this episode, I think, as harshly as the second episode did. So where my rankings are right now, I think this is the top one for me, just solely on the fact that I thought there was strong delivery in both, but pacing didn't hurt this one as much as it hurt the episode 2. So to me, I'm at an 8.5 out of 10. Haki, what is your final verdict?
That's very interesting, dude. I've been about a point ahead of you this entire time, and I'm actually lower than you. I am at an 8.0 flat. So as I said before, I love when the infected is a main part of these episodes, and for me, it just didn't hit that. We're going to get into it, but I think they missed the ball on at least one really good scene where they could have had, one infected at least in that scene. But again, it was a filler episode. I usually don't like filler episodes, but this one did fill in the blanks for me. And again, that last scene that we're going to talk about, super emotional. I was about to cry. It was really good. And I think, you being at an 8.5 makes sense because you did play the video games. Those video game references are super important, especially if they hit the mark, which they obviously did. And, I enjoy the episode, but I wish I got that infected. I think it could have been better. Even that one scene, if they gave me some infected, or if they threw some Seraphites or Isaac in there at some point, I think it could have been a little bit better. But I'm at an 8.0 flat. Yeah,
and what are your thoughts on The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Also hit that thumbs up and that subscribe button to help support the channel, and think about becoming a member for some additional premium perks. And now let's dive into our spoiler discussion. All right, Haki, we're going to talk about our spoiler discussion, and if you've been following us, what we like to do is hit on some major events that go on in the episode. We don't want to go line by line dissecting every details because we don't want this to be an hour-long episode each week. But there are some big moments here. And, we kind of mentioned it in our non-spoiler, Haki talks of it as like a filler. This does fill in the gaps here, right? We're taking a jump back in time. This is a complete flashback episode to fill in a bunch of gaps here and some added things. So they've done some things that you saw in the game. They also added some things here. And I just want to start off with the opening scene. This was not in the games, but it starts off with, you see like two boys there, right? There's a young boy, there's an older boy, and they're having this discussion. The young boy is crying, and it ends up being Tommy. And he's talking to the older brother, which is Joel, and you could tell that Tommy's in trouble. So Tommy got in trouble. He's afraid of their dad coming home and beating him for something that he did. We don't know what it is just yet, but Joel says, don't worry about it. Like, he's not going to touch you. I'm the one who's going to take it, right? So he's pretty much gearing up to take the fall for something that Tommy did. And now the father comes in, and he's a cop. So this is like a big flashback to when Joel and Tommy were young, obviously before everything went to hell. And then the cop sits in. He says, tell me what happened. And they talked about how they were buying drugs. Joel's trying to say that he was buying drugs, but really Tommy and Joel got in a fight with the dealer. So he tries to tell a lie that he was buying it, and and his dad, who was played by a really good actor from Better Call Saul. I forget the actor's name, but he was Lalo in Better Call Saul. He did a really good job in this. But Joel's father, he says, I know you're lying, right? I spoke to the cops who were on the scene. And he just says, like, you're not going to touch Tommy, right? And so he sits down and he talks about when he was young, and one time he stole a candy bar. And, he made the reference that pretty much that his grandfather was the one that raised, like, his grandfather told him to return the candy bar. And when he got home, he beat the hell out of him, broke his jaw, and he bloodied him, right? And he had to go into, school, go out in public with a wired up jaw, and like how humiliating that was for him. And then he says, I know that I've hit you, but, I think I've done a little better job than my father did. And he says, one day when you have someone that you care about, maybe you'll be a little bit better than me, right? And so really interesting dynamic there. This is never referenced in the game. They bring back a kind of how Joel's and Tommy's upbringing. The dad, it looked like there was no mom in the picture, and it was just the dad who's a cop, hard-nosed guy. And I thought it was a very interesting scene. And again, I'm interested to hear what Haki thinks, because this was interesting to me. No reference of this stuff in the game. This was obviously new. But Haki, what are your thoughts on kind of this opening scene, a background into the childhood of Joel and Tommy and kind of their upbringing?
Yeah, I think this was very interesting. You can kind of see where Joel gets his toughness from,
Yep.
Kind of grew up with a dad that might have hit him a couple times, but very interesting. You can also see that Joel always wanted to be kind of like the protector,
Yeah.
Always wanted to protect, whoever he loves. He wanted to protect his daughter who got shot in the first season, like I'm pretty sure the first episode. He always obviously wants to protect Ellie, almost like a stepdaughter to him. Always wanted to protect Tommy, as you can see. So you can kind of see that Joel has always been, the guy that's willing to, take the hit, willing to lie, to
Yes.
not do what he wants, but willing to lie to the people that he loves to not hurt them, to kind of protect them. So I think that this flashback, especially right in the beginning of the episode, was very interesting and kind of set up who Joel is, in the future.
Yeah, and that line that they use, right? That was a great point. And it sets up Joel, not only his toughness, but his willingness to lie to protect people, right? So that's a very interesting point. I didn't even think of that until you just said it. So then it dives into Jackson, right? And it shows, Joel a couple months in, has a conversation with Seth, trying to smuggle. He's trying to get something. So he smuggled something in for Seth, which was Legos for his grandkids. And in return, he wanted to get a cake, right? And this cake ends up being... He also wanted to get some gear that he could help build a guitar. And this is for Ellie's 15th birthday. So, he's working on some stuff. He gets a cake. All of a sudden, Tommy brings in Ellie. Ellie, and she made a reference to this in a previous episode, burnt her arm. And the reason why she burns her arm, which Joel confronts her later on why he knows that she did it, because she references before, is she got bit in the arm. That's where she first got bit. And so she burnt herself to hide that scar of being bit because she got tired of wearing long sleeves all the time. So she wanted to wear, she's trying to, damage herself so that people don't notice that she's been bit, right? Because obviously that opens a can of worms. So she burns herself. They're kind of back and forth, kind of playing off like Ellie's playing stupid. Joel's kind of playing stupid with Tommy, like how could this happen? Yada, yada, yada. And then when he leaves, you could see kind of they put that mask on and mask off. They're willing to do these little lies here and there, right? So he shows her the cake. He shows her the guitar that he made. And again, the nice back and forth that you see, the joking, really good dynamic that we've seen all in season 1. That continues in this part, right? So, we get the 15th birthday. Then we're going to be jumping into, and I'll leave it to that. But any comments, Hockey, on kind of the dynamic? You could see young Ellie. It was only a couple months in from Jackson, pretty much right after season 1 ends. You see her still that kid, still that jokester, that dynamic. Played pretty well by Ellie here. I think that's where really her wheelhouse is, that young Ellie and that Joel dynamic. But any thoughts on that, on those scenes that I described?
You can kind of see the father-daughter dynamic really strong here, and they kind of joke with each other. Ellie eats the cake with her hands, and then it gets Joel to laugh. So there's always kind of a fun dynamic, especially during that point of their relationship. And I always thought the barter system was pretty cool. Like I give you these Legos and you give me guitar strings or whatever, whatever you handed over. The barter system, kind of the old school way of doing things. Like, hey, you give me this, I'll give you this, is pretty cool. But yeah, I kind of like the flashbacks to the birthdays, and even the next one. The next birthday was probably one of my favorite parts. So you can go ahead and go into that. Yeah,
man. I'll jump into that. Then it jumps another year, right? So they're going year by year. It's pretty much by birthdays. Then it goes to Ellie's 16th birthday, and this is a big scene from the game, showing again that connection, that love between Ellie and Joel, and that is they're going through the woods and they end up at a museum, and this really is one of the strongest references you get, almost like scene by scene. Now, a big difference here in the game is that you do have to deal with some infected as part of the museum, right? So they don't do that part here, but everything else, when it goes to the spaceship, the Apollo references going into the spaceship, playing the cassette, those are, they really one-to-oneing that, and it's a feel-good moment. It's Joel trying to be a dad there, trying to make Ellie happy, celebrate something with her. So to me, that was a huge game reference, done very well, almost scene by scene, with the museum, the dinosaurs, and then obviously going into the astronaut stuff. Then they jump another year later to her 17th birthday. And, this is where he gets another cake. This is a different one, right? He's going up to the stairs. He hears some noise in the room. He opens the door, and Ellie is with another girl, right? So she was getting a little intimate. Joel busts through the door. He's like, and like a dad kind of catching, your 17-year-old with someone else. There's the confrontation. Like, what the hell is going on? He's like, he tells the lady, get the hell out, and she tries to pick up what she was working on Ellie with, which she's in that first couple episodes when they made a reference on she was a former lover of yours, right? So that was the girl, younger, right? A couple years younger. And it was a tattoo, she was working on Ellie's arm, making a tattoo. So funny thing, right? We go from 15, very childish, 16, getting a little bit, but still enjoying that childhood stuff. 17 now. You're starting to see she was smoking weed, I'm pretty sure. Right? She had to put out the blunt. Joel had to put out the blunt. He was like, you're experimenting with other girls. He's like, you're getting tattoos. He's like, damn, you're puberty hitting all at once. So again, it's when I say an interesting, they're trying to show Ellie's she's going through her teenage phases, right? So she's trying things. Joel only father experience was with her daughter who passed early. So he doesn't even have that experience of her kind of at that age. So you're seeing that dynamic that I'm sure if you were a parent, I'm not a parent, but parents probably pick up that reference pretty well as like dealing with a teenager who makes a big jump and is kind of pushing you away a little bit. But that's kind of the 16 and 17 dynamic. Hockey, thoughts on everything that I talked about there?
Yeah, birthday number 16 I thought was really cool. You know, she's a kid, like you said, she's still a kid here, hasn't reached, you know, that puberty yet of 17. So 16, loves dinosaurs, loves space, you know, so she's hopping on top of the dinosaur, she's super excited, goes into the museum. Like you said, man, I think they missed the mark. They could have had any type of infected here. Just, you know, kill one infected for me. You know, give me something, give me some type of infected. They didn't. Not that big of a deal, but I think they missed the mark there. What I did really love is when they went into the spaceship or the capsule, you get to see Ellie, who was born, literally born into the craziest world ever, the most infected world ever, right?
Yeah.
You get to see her use her imagination and like leave the infected world and become an astronaut for like a quick minute with a cassette in, you know, with a countdown 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. I think that was one of the really cool parts of this episode. You get to see Ellie take a step out of the real world, go into her imagination, be a happy child. You know, be an actual, you know, fun-loving, happy child for once. And, you know, and Joel, you can see he almost tears up a little bit. He goes, you know, did I do well? And she's like, are you kidding me? Of course you did well. So you got Joel really happy. You got Ellie really happy in the space capsule. And then again, we always talk about it, the environment. You know, the museum, even the dinosaur covered in, you know, bushes and stuff like that. The museum, overgrown. The space capsule looked really great. It was really cool. This is actually one of my favorite scenes throughout the entire season. Really, I mean, it really stood out to me.
Yeah, and it's great that you pick, because that's one of the big game references that we saw in this episode was that. And then, you know, little details of going back to the 17th birthday and the run-in with, you know, Joel finding out that Ellie is experimenting, is that she tattoos herself with a moth symbol that's still being worked on. You can see pictures of moths, and Joel's trying to figure, you know, a teenage girl out, or, you know, any teenager out, is like, you know, what is the moth meaning to you? Like, is it talking about growth? And Ellie doesn't really give an answer. And then Ellie also tries to make a move. She wants to leave the house and go into the garage, and then there's that confrontation, right? Like, this is my house, my rules. And then she's like, it's not your house, they gave you that. You know, the same teenage fighting with your parents stuff they tried to show here. And then Joel kind of gives up, like, hey, I know you want a little bit of space, you know, let me work on the garage and then you can move there. Kind of showing how Ellie got to that part. Then we go into a 2-year jump, and this is when she's 19, and, you know, she's sitting in a room or in the garage, and she's trying to bring up a conversation she wants to have with Joel. And it's talking about the incident with the Fireflies, with the hospital. So she's pretending that she's talking to him, trying to bring up questions that she would have, which were pretty good questions, right? That she's been probably thinking about for a long time. Like, number one, if the Fireflies found us right outside the hospital, how did raiders sneak up on them, right? And then if there was a whole group of raiders that came to the hospital and you were carrying me out of the hospital, how did we escape while they were mowing down all the other people? And the third thing is, if there was so many immune people, how has there not been a cure yet? Which are all good questions here that hasn't fully been answered by Joel, but she's trying to muster the courage to ask Joel these questions that, you know, she's been pondering since the end of season 1. But then Joel shows up, and then she kind of gets cold feet. But he says, you know what? You're 19. I gave the okay for you to go on your patrol, because she did complain about that. I didn't mention in the previous birthday, is like, I'm old enough. Jesse goes on patrols. You know, let me go on patrols. And then he finally says, we'll let you go on patrol. You're going to come with me. And so they're going through the woods. Joel's trying to give pointers to Ellie. Ellie's still being a smartass. And then they get a call, right, on the walkie-talkie, that Eugene and Adam are in trouble. You guys are the closest to them. They need backup. And now I was getting excited, because, you know, we've been hearing about Eugene, right? We have had multiple references, and I'm like, we're going to see now the Eugene moment. So now, you know, Joel's saying go back, and Ellie's like, no, I'm your partner, right? Partners stick together. We have each other's back. They go. They start traveling towards the area. They get off their horses. They kind of climb down the mountain, and their guns drawn. And you can kind of hear some gunshots in the background. They hear kind of the infected in the distance. So they're making their way through the woods. This is where, again, this is the downer to me on the episode. This is the lowest point for the episode for me. So the funny part to me is, so they have a horse, one of the horses from the group from running by, and it's dragging a dude. And I'm assuming that's Adam. And they watch Adam get dragged by them, who's dead, I think, already. But like, they are so unfazed by, wait, was that Adam? No one even bothers to care if that was Adam or not. But they just keep going forward. They see an infected that's dead, and then they run upon Eugene. And Eugene, played by another famous actor, I keep forgetting his name. You could tell he's been like, he's all disheveled, he's like beat up, and he's the one who killed the infected. But, you know, Ellie's trying to go up to him because they're from the same town, Jackson. Joel stops her, points it and says, "Are you clean?" Right? And Eugene says, "I got bit." Right? And he shows he gets bit. He's got bit in the gut. And then Joel pulling up the gun, you know, ready to off him. And Eugene is trying to stop him because he's like, "I know I'm going to die. Can you just take me back? I have a little bit of time because of where you get bit," right? It goes back to season 1 where the different spot you get bit, how long you have. And he's like, "Let me just see Gail. Let me just say goodbye to Gail, right? Before you do what you have to do," right? Now, I get that understanding. You're dying. That's Gail is her wife, which is the therapist for anyone who doesn't remember. But if you're Joel makes a lot of sense by, we can't risk that, right? Like, we can't risk you infecting someone that you're done, right? So he's ready to kill. Ellie tries to do a test with him, a test that, you know, hold out your hand and count to 10. So he does it. He passes the test, and Ellie tells Joel he's got time. Why don't we just tie him up, right? So he can't, and then bring him back. So they're trying to create a scenario, this conflict. And then Joel's like, "All right, go get the horses, and I'll stay here with Eugene." Ellie already, you know, she starts to walk and then stops, turns back to him because she feels as if Joel might not follow through here. And Joel says, like he did at the end of season 1, he promises that he won't do anything. So he goes, right? And then Joel starts walking Eugene. They go down to a riverbank there. And then Eugene realizes Joel's not following through. He's taking you to the riverbank and he's going to kill him. And so he tries to talk him out of it. And he's saying, you know, like, "If you give me your last words, I'll pass it on to Gail." And he's like, "I don't want to give you a last word. I want to hear her last words. That's how I want to end, right? Let me end with that." And, you know, Joel doesn't buy it, right? Joel tells him, you know, "Don't look this direction." And then, you know, he tells Eugene that if he loves someone, you'll be able to see them no matter what, right? You'll be able to envision them no matter what. And so Eugene takes off his glasses. He looks out into the ocean and he says, "I do see her." And then Joel blasts him, right? The problem I have is this was the perfect time for the infected moment. Show us, don't tell us. They always don't show me the aftermath. You could have cut to Eugene and Adam, right? This would have been a good opportunity to give a little Eugene time because we've referenced him a few times. How did the infected attack them, right? I would have loved that. And then show the aftermath after, right? Like, we had a bunch of Ellie and Joel. Cut to this different group right here and then make a little reference. That's Eugene. I don't care about Adam, but hell, have him there. Show me how the infected got to that point. That's the only issue that I have. Not so much that we didn't get a large-scale horde, but just show, don't tell. You just show me the aftermath. And so, Haki, before we get to the last bit, which is another huge, huge part from the game, thoughts on this one? This, to me, was the lowest part for me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, dude, I feel bad for Adam. He just was being dragged along by the horse. I'm pretty sure horses are like super important in this world as well. Like, you would think that they would try to do something to get the horse or something, dude. Like, we need to get this horse. Like, maybe Adam's alive. I don't know, but yeah,
they just did not care about Adam at all. They did not care.
The horse is so important in this world, you know. Like, just there. Okay, we'll let the horse go. Horse just run free, you know. Yeah, man. You're exactly right. It was probably the worst part of the episode. They could have shown any type of infected scene. They could have shown Even if the horse took Adam away, they could have shown
how he got knocked
Eugene
out, how he died, or whatever.
infected.
Yeah, whatever.
Anything, dude. They could have showed. Ellie and Joel could have ran up on Eugene while he was fighting off the infected. They see him get bit. He kills the infected, or Ellie kills the infected. Joel kills the infected. Anything could have happened, but they just, I don't know, they didn't want to spend the money on the scene with the infected, the artist money to dress someone up as an infected. I don't know what it is, but this was probably, a scene that was lost for me, and it was an important scene too.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did like about the scene, how it was written, is you didn't hear Joel shoot the gun, but you saw the aftermath of Joel shoot the gun, right? All the birds just scatter. He sees, he says, "I see her," and then it just pans out to past the trees while you're looking at the oceans and the trees, and then boom, 30 or 40 birds up from the trees. Obviously, he clapped them right in the head.
Yep. Yeah. Good. Yeah. That interesting way, right? They didn't show the gun. They showed the image of the bird scatter, which kind of hinted at it. Then Ellie comes up upon them, realizes he's dead, even though Joel said he didn't have a choice. So they drag the body back. Tommy brings out Gale, and they have this. This is kind of where the spark of confrontation comes, right? So Joel starts lying on what happened. That how Eugene, number one, he was ready to die. He wasn't afraid. Eugene said he was afraid. He wanted to tell you that he loved you. Yes, that was kind of what he was saying, but that's not exactly how he wanted, and that he shot himself. He not only did, but he killed himself. So Joel's lying probably to paint himself, as not looking like a savage. Now Joel probably did the right thing, right? I mean, but you see the coldness, the savagery of anyone outside of Ellie that Joel has. And you saw that kind of on display, willing to just lie that easy. And then Ellie stops it and tells the truth. He says, that's not what happened. And Ellie feels hurt because Joel promised, similar to what happened at the hospital, he did the same thing here. And she feels, well, she knows, at least with the Eugene, that she's lying. So now she's really questioning the lying from Joel. And she tells him that you promised and you broke that. Now Gale slaps him. Ellie walks off. Real rough scene there. Then it cuts again to kind of right before he dies. We go to the New Year's Eve party right before the all the crap hits the fan, and it shows Joel. This was another one with Tommy and Marie, and Tommy takes the son to bed, has a little talk with Marie because they had a little bit of a fight in that episode about resources. And she says that you're family, right? And that, that we'll stick together type of stuff. And then the incident with Seth happens, and he comes and pushes, he pushes Seth down. Then it goes to the porch scene. And before I dive into it, that Eugene stuff, because that is not part of the game. So if you did not play the game, all that Eugene stuff did not happen. And why I bring that reference up, because the whole you promise stuff, and that Ellie kind of knows that Joel's been lying about everything. She finds out he's lying in a different way than what we see in the show. She actually goes to a hospital and finds a tape from the Fireflies that describes what happened at the hospital. So she finds a tape recording of the incident that occurred, and that's how she finds out and pretty much tells Joel, we're done with I'm done with you. And so that's the big difference here. This Eugene factor was new. Because he dies differently in the game. And so they created this new scenario where Ellie now does not trust Joel. Then we have the incident on the porch. And last time we saw this, Ellie just walked right by and the scene cut. And then they've made these references since then about what was the last conversation you had with Joel? Are you and Joel good? You remember all that stuff right there? Now they show Ellie actually came back out. She came back out. This happens in the game. So this is all what's really, now the timing of it is very different, right? So she comes back out and confronts Joel. And she said, I'm going to give you one chance. Tell me exactly what happened. She runs through. There were no raiders. You're the one who killed all of them. And he admits to it, right? And she pretty much says, could they have made a cure? And he says, yes. Now, this is the one thing I will push back. Great scene. But a big part of The Last of Us and the whole thing about the cure was that they did not know if could be a cure. Yes, they think the doctor is the only one who could do it. He was one of the best doctors that they had during this thing. If there anyone who could, it would be him to do it. But they didn't know because it failed multiple times. I'm not trying to remember if this doctor failed, but multiple doctors failed to make a cure, and multiple people died who they thought were immune, right? So they killed people who were immune, who might have had immunity to make this cure, and the cures didn't work. So the only thing when they say, like, could have been a cure, and he says yes, and like, you took the cure away, you took the possibility of a cure away. We don't know for a fact that the cure, because in the game they made multiple references on the failed experiments of trying to create a cure. So I know that they're trying to push this on, like, Joel made this decision that took away a cure. It took away the potential of a cure. So it's not this Joel was like the cure was guaranteed. That's the one thing I'll push back, but everything else so strong. And he says, you know, Ellie's like, you did it because you were selfish. And Joel says, I did it because I loved you. And that was such a good and well acted between them. Really strong scene between them. And then Joel talks about in this right from the game, like, if he had the opportunity to go back and redo it, he would do it all the same. Right? So such a strong moment. Super line by lines with the game. Really good. And then he says this line, which references in the beginning of the episode, which again, I really like. He says, you know, I love you. And then he talks about maybe one day when you love someone, you don't understand it right now, but if you love someone so much that you'll be a little bit better than me. Referencing his father, the same line he said to him in the beginning episode. Really good stuff. And then Ellie says, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm willing to try. And that shows that they did have that conversation, right? This does happen in the game, but the timing of it is later in the game, right? So you don't know for the longest time, did this conversation happen, right? We find out here, which is definitely earlier than I expected, but it shows that conversation did happen. Aki, I know I talked about a lot. It was a huge moment in the story. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm just going to stick with the ending, because that was, I think, possibly the best acting that I've seen maybe throughout both seasons, and from both main characters, right? The questions that she had, he answered them, you know, yes, I killed Marlene, all this stuff. I did want to ask you, and you had you know, just answered my question. I had thought, even in the hospital, they had referenced that it was in it, that it was going to be a cure, but that they were super, super hopeful, like 99% sure that there was a 1% chance that it wasn't going to happen. And that's why he took it upon himself to murder everyone in that hospital. But super emotional, you know, both of them hysterical crying. And I like the dynamic. You know, you can see that they both really do love each other. You know, yes. Joel, you know, he lost his daughter, and he had to take it upon himself to essentially save Ellie, bring Ellie to the hospital. Like, Ellie essentially became his daughter, and Ellie didn't have a father, right? So, you know, Joel was pretty much Ellie's father, even though kind of at the end, there was a couple, you know, scenes where she was just like, I'm not your child, you're not my father, you know, stuff like that. But this was, I think, one of the best scenes so far, probably the best scene in this season. Yes. Between both of the main actors, Joel and Ellie. And yeah, man, it's super emotional. I was about to cry there. You know, I think it was very well written, and it was acted fantastically.
Yeah, and it showed the dynamic, right? And that's what I think showed the dynamic well of Joel battling, doesn't want to lose his daughter, right? Willing to, you know, sacrifice the world to protect her, potentially. Right. And for Ellie, her life had potential meaning. She could have been the cure, and now she feels like she lost that meaning. And what does that mean for her? So this is that dynamic, but still showing that they love each other. Ellie still, even though she's so mad at Joel, doesn't know she wants to. She wants to, and that's the type of drive that should be setting up of all the events that we see now. But what are your thoughts on The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6? What was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? Make sure to hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button to help support the channel, guys, and think about becoming a member, like I said before, for some premium perks on some new content. But that is it for us. I know we talked about a bunch. Again, appreciate everyone who tuned in. As always, at the end screen, you'll see our review from last week's episode, episode 5. But with that, this is Frank and Aki from Marsman Gaming signing off. Game on.